Up. All right, John chapter 7, commencing at verse 1. I'll skip around a bit, so listen at least to the reading of this narrative in the life of Jesus. John chapter 7, verse 1 says, "After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He did not wish to go about in Judea because the Jews were looking for an opportunity to kill him. Now the Jewish festival of booths was near. So his brothers said to him, 'Leave here and go to Judea so that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one who wants to be widely known acts in secret. If you do these things, show yourself to the world.' For not even his brothers believed in him. And Jesus said to them, 'My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify against it that its works are evil. Go to the festival yourselves. I'm not going to this festival, for my time has not yet fully come.' After saying this, he remained in Galilee. But after his brothers had gone to the festival, then he went out, not publicly, but as it were in secret, and the Jews were looking for him at the festival. About the middle of the festival, Jesus went up into the temple and began to teach. And the Jews were astonished at it, saying, 'How does this man have such learning when he has never been taught?' Then Jesus answered them, 'My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. Anyone who resolves to do the will of God will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own. Those who speak on their own seek their own glory. But the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true. There is nothing false in him. Did not Moses give you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why are you looking for an opportunity to kill me?' And the crowd answered, 'You have a demon. Who is trying to kill you?' Verse 5 says, 'For not even his brothers believed in him.' For the time that desires to share, I want to think on the thought, a high tolerance for disappointment. A high tolerance for disappointment. You can take your seat. A high tolerance for disappointment. Have you all ever just been so committed to a thing that in many ways it has occupied much of your thinking? It has leased space in your heart and in your mind. And you give your all to a particular project, a particular function, and inevitably, for whatever reason, it fails. It doesn't seem to be how much work you put into it, no matter how much you engaged it, how much you treasured it, prepared for it. For whatever reason, disappointment and failure seem to be omnipresent in your life. It seems that disappointment is one of those unavoidable ingredients of what it means to be alive, because you cannot escape the threshold of this world without experiencing moments of failure, moments of disappointment, moments of regret, moments of setback. But there is something about life that teaches us that the more we come not simply to love disappointment, but to anticipate disappointment, it seems to give us different resources for living and engaging life. Because the deepest thing about learning to live with disappointment is that you don't allow yourself to be paralyzingly surprised by what goes wrong. Because there are things in life, no matter how much energy you put into it, no matter how much time you dedicate to it, no matter what life seems to present to you, that you will find yourself tripping up over moments of disappointment. And the problem is that sometimes disappointment can grow in you like cancer if you don't allow it to, if you don't allow yourself to face it, if you don't allow yourself to lean into it, if you do not allow yourself to understand that disappointment and failure are simply matters of life, then you will find yourself paralyzed in places that another try could have gotten you out of. I don't know if I'm coming through clearly, but the only antidote for disappointment is to try again. And what seemingly happens is that we allow disappointment to cripple us. We allow it to rob us of our imagination, to rob us of our creativity, to rob us of our will to move forward. But I am a strong believer that sometimes disappointment will teach you that failure is not fatal, but actually failure gives you the resources to move forward in spite of where you have been. But you cannot look at failure as if it is the marker of your life. You cannot look at disappointment as if it is characteristic of who you are, because if all you are is what you do, then there's not simply much to you anyway. But you have to get to the point and get to the place where you don't allow disappointment to tank your life, but you allow disappointment to catapult your life, because there will be times where people will not show up. There will be times where the money will not come through. There will be times where the business plan will fail. There will be times that people that you thought would support you will not support you. But you have to learn how to say it is par for the course, and I am not going to allow the negativity that creeps into my life. I'm not going to allow the unavoidable reality of disappointment, the unavoidable reality of failure to keep me from pursuing what God has called me to pursue, because the power of my identity is not connected in my ability to do it well every time. The power of my identity is the ability to get up after I've fallen and to try it again. I really wish there were some people in here today who are honest enough, bold enough to say, I have failed at some things. I have missed the mark on some things. I have lived with self-disappointment in some things, but I did not allow my disappointment to keep me stagnated in places that I had outgrown. Because when I fell, I picked myself up and I tried it again. And you know why I tried it again? Because my God is with me. And when God is with you, there is no failure that can assassinate your progress. You need a high tolerance for disappointment, which means that sometimes you have to learn how to practice self-compassion. You have to learn how to be a conspirator. You have to learn how to be the subject of your own grace conspiracy. That you have to learn how to love yourself and to feed yourself and to encourage yourself and to mobilize yourself and stop expecting other people to pour into you if you're not willing to pour into you. You need a high tolerance for disappointment, because people will piss you off, people will make you mad, people will rob you of your identity, but you have to say, I am more than what I just happened to me. I am more than where I've been. Is there anybody in here today that can say, greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world? And I may fail, I may disappoint myself, but as long as I have breath in my body, I have one more shot. As long as I have strength in my arms, I have one more shot. As long as I can breathe and think and move and love, there's still hope for me. Sometimes you need a high tolerance for disappointment, because life will prove to you over and over again that it's not for you. Life will remind you over and over again that you have to learn how to trust yourself, because trusting the world will not always mobilize you out of your miserable situations. You have to believe in yourself enough to say disappointment may be real, but it's not to my detriment. And here's Jesus. He, according to the text, is walking around Galilee. Usually when we encounter Jesus, Jesus is teaching. Jesus is preaching. Jesus is performing some unusual miracle that seemingly breaks the confidence of the people who are in power. But this time we don't find Jesus preaching. We don't find Jesus teaching. We don't find Jesus doing miracles, but we find Jesus walking around in his hometown. And it says that Jesus is not going into Judea because they are trying to kill him there. And they want to kill him because he's too powerful. But not only is he living under the threat of the empire, not only is he living under the threat of the religious leaders, but we have Jesus here who has just been abandoned by his so-called disciples. We don't find Jesus sitting with Peter, James, and John. We don't find Jesus teaching multitudes of crowds, but we find Jesus, according to the text, walking about Galilee by himself because the ministry called him to go to Judea, but Judea was too dangerous. I really wish that you could really see where I was trying to get here today, because Jesus has just experienced failure because the people in power are trying to kill him and his disciples have walked away from him, and instead of him teaching and preaching in spite of the opinions of people, we have Jesus walking around his hometown because the context for doing ministry doesn't seem to be safe. I love this child of God, because when you want to have a high tolerance for disappointment, you have to learn how to resist the pressures of rejection, because sometimes rejection will cause you to reimagine your ministry in order to please people instead of serve people. Have you ever been there before? In order for you not to lose popularity, you're willing to compromise your identity. You're willing to compromise your integrity. You're willing to compromise what you know God has called you to do, because what God has called you to do actually is not popular to people who don't want to grow. It's not popular for people who don't want to move forward. But I wish there was somebody in here today that can say, God has given me a gift, and people may not be able to handle my gift. People may walk away from me because of my gift. People may talk about me because of my gift. But God has given me a gift. Are there any gifted people in here today that you can say that sometimes my giftedness doesn't attract beauty, but sometimes my giftedness attracts brutality, because people will talk about you. People will malign you. People will tell you that you're not worth what you are trying to do. People will tell you that you cannot do it, that it's too hard for you. But if you have a high tolerance for disappointment, then you understand that it doesn't matter what people tell me, because my ears are too attuned to what God is telling me. Jesus had just failed. They walked away from Jesus because his teaching gift was too hard. They wanted Jesus to perform miracles, and Jesus says, I didn't come here to perform miracles. I didn't come here to please you. I came here to teach you. I came here to make you better. I came here to help you see yourself outside of the context that has been shaping you. And they walk away from Jesus. And is there anybody in here today that understands that when the minute you stop trying to please people and you try to better people, sometimes they will walk away from you because people are more invested in your productivity than they are your personhood. I need somebody in here today that can say, I don't want you to believe in me because I'm gifted. I want you to believe in me because I'm Willie. I want you to believe in me because I'm a child of God. If I never perform another miracle, if I never get another job, if I'm never able to let you borrow money, if I'm never able to give you any more advice, if I'm never able to move you beyond your pain, you ought to still love me because I'm me and not because I have something that you need. Do you all know any parasites in your life that all they want to do is drain your imagination, drain your gifts, drain your potential, and the moment you start doing something that doesn't please them, they walk away from you? But I come to let somebody know today, you don't have to give them time to walk away from you, but sometimes you need to give them some pink slips on the front end and say, I'm not here to please you, but I'm here to make you better. Jesus is just walking around. He's experiencing, trying to figure out how he's going to move forward, because Jesus had a mega church in the wilderness. Jesus had thousands of people following him. He had just fed 20,000 people, if you include the women and the children, and you ought to include the women and the children. He just fed 20,000 people, and they walk away from him. Although he fed them, they walk away from him because he decided to teach them. And I am discovering today that simply because you like part of my ministry and you can't handle all of my ministry, that I'm not going to reduce myself to the part of the ministry that you. I wish there were some people in here today who can say sometimes my biggest adversaries are not the crowd, but my biggest adversaries live in my house. They share my blood. They share my same DNA. This is Jesus talking. Jesus' brothers try to give him advice that doesn't seem to be good advice. Oh, child of God, I wish there was somebody in here today that can say, I know what it means to be victimized by the assumptions of family members who try to tell you what you need to do when they haven't done anything on their own. Jesus' brothers say, oh no, don't stay here. If you want to be famous, you need to go to Jerusalem. If you want to get your disciples back, you need to go to Jerusalem. And you have to learn, child of God, how to turn your ears off from bad advice from good people. Because just because they love you, and just because they know you, and just because they grew up with you, just because they raised you, doesn't mean they know what's best for you. Because they're living life based on their own assumptions, and you heard from God a long time. You all ever have those familial wounds, those times where family members can sometimes be the biggest block for you getting where you need to be. But I need to let somebody know it's okay to cut the umbilical cord, because if they try to reduce you to what you can do for them instead of encouraging you for who God is calling you to be, you have to know how to shift scenes. You have to know how to walk away. You have to know how to say, it might not have worked out the first time, but I'm going to keep on trying, because God didn't call me to be successful. God called me to be faithful. And when you're faithful, you can fail and still have a smile on your face. When you're faithful, you can fail and still keep on moving. That's how you find success in failure, because you have stick-to-itiveness, because you have faithfulness, because you have endurance, because you don't allow failure to assassinate your progression. They tell Jesus, they say, Jesus, you lost all those disciples last week. In order for you to be who you say you're going to be, you need to go to Jerusalem and give the people what they expect. I love this, because they tell Jesus that if you want to be famous, there it is right there. It's not that they don't believe in Jesus, because they do believe in his gifts. The problem is they don't understand what Jesus is actually coming for, because they want Jesus to be a religious thespian. They want him to put on shows. They don't want him to make a difference. And you better guard your life against people who only want to see your show, but they don't want to see your sacrifice. They only want to see your demonstration, but they don't want to see what you went through to get there. I don't need people just to believe in my gifts. I need people to stand with me in my weeping. Stand with me when I'm up all night. Stand with me when I'm struggling. Stand with me when I'm sacrificing. Stand with me when my tear ducts are dry, because I just spent all night crying my head out. Is there anybody in here today that can say, I'm tired of people who only want to use me, but they don't want to push me? Oh, come on here, come on here, come on here. There's too much God in me for me to be who you want me to be. There's too much God in me for me to dumb down my ministry in order to please you. And if you're not careful, you allow people who you love to push you to places where you never belonged. And Jesus says, no, you can't tell me how to be me, but you have to let me be myself. You cannot tell me, micromanage my gifts when you have been a poor steward of your gifts. You cannot live vicariously through me because you're too afraid to do something on your own. You have to learn how to say no. I'll never forget, I'm a Batman fan. I really love Batman movies. And when Heath Ledger played the Joker, I think that was one of my favorite depictions of the Joker. He really channeled Brother Joker in some very powerful ways that as you were watching it, you thought that he was the Joker, that you forgot that this was a movie because he looked like Joker so much. And you know what happened to Heath Ledger? Unfortunately, he overdosed on drugs because according to people who were close to him and according to the diary that he left behind, he started using drugs because he became deeply depressed because of the role that he was playing, that he spent so much time playing the Joker that he lost himself while trying to be the person that somebody else wrote the script for him. I think you just missed it. Heath Ledger started using drugs because as he was trying to be the Joker, which was the script that they had given him, he found himself losing himself and using drugs, that he committed suicide because he had become someone who other people had wrote for him instead of being who he was for himself. Come here, child of God. And that's why some of us are committing emotional suicide and spiritual suicide and occupational suicide and sexual suicide because we allow ourselves to be fitting into the scripts that other people have written for us. But I need somebody in here today that can say, you can't write my script for me. You can't tell me who I am. You don't have enough money to buy me. You don't have enough favors to control me because I'm gonna be me. All right. Jesus, I love this. Jesus is wrestling with the nonsensical nature of why people are trying to kill him. He's wrestling with the fact that his disciples are no longer following him, but he still finds the determination to say, I'm not going to allow myself to be recreated in the image of small-minded people. You can walk away from me, I'm still gonna be me. You may never show up again, I'm still gonna be me. You may break up with me, but I'm still gonna be me. You may try to fire me, but I'm still gonna be me. I may be disinvited from the family reunion, but I'm still gonna be me. Is there anybody in here today that can say, I'm radically, audaciously me? You have to revolt against the pressures of rejection, because sometimes rejection and failure will send you to places where you never should have been in the first place, because you begin to overperform to please people instead of living out your true identity. Revolt against the pressures of rejection, but you also need to reclaim the priorities despite the risk. Reclaim your priorities despite the risk. I love this, that although Jesus tells his brothers he's not going to put on a show for people, he still goes to Jerusalem, and it says in secret. And what is powerful about this is that Jesus says, no, my hour has not yet come, but which means that no, it's not time for me to die, but he still makes the commute from Galilee to Judea in secret. And what is unique about this is that Judea, as the text says, is inhospitable and is antagonistic to Jesus. And so now what we find out is that they plan to kill Jesus because he's too powerful. They plan to kill Jesus because there's something about Jesus that threatens the power of everybody else. And this is what it happens. When you know how powerful you are, you learn to live in expectation of antagonism. When you know how powerful you are, you know that there will be some things in your life that try to cripple and curtail where you are headed. Jesus says, no, I don't want to go to Judea, but I'm going to go anyway because my faith is bigger than the risk. Come on, I really wish that set well with some. I wish that landed in a different way for you. I need somebody in here today who has been told that they could not do it, who's been told that it's too hard, who've been told that you didn't come from that type of stock. You've been told if your mama wasn't anything, you're not going to be anything. Who've been told the fact that you don't have a father in your life, you will never be a productive, contributing citizen in the world. I need you in here to say, in spite of the risk, I have more faith than to stay still. Jesus' power creates antagonism. I love this. And Jesus says, the world hates me. And the reason why the world doesn't hate you is because you have too much of the world in you. And when you have too much of the world in you, you will always find yourself placating to people who have position, but they don't really have power. Because you do know there's a difference between somebody who has power and somebody who has a position. Because you can lose your position, but you can never lose your power. Oh, come here, child of God. You thought that they had authority over you. You thought they had the last word over you. You thought that they were bigger than you. But God sent me here to tell you today, they may have position, but you have the power. And you know why you have the power? Because you've leaned into the dark presence of God. And you've allowed God to tell you that you are mine. And because you are mine, there's nothing that you cannot do. Jesus says the world hates me. And every day I wake up, I promise, I ask God to use me to offend people who think they have power. Every day I wake up, I ask God to allow me to use my prophetic gifts, the very gifts that people may not like about me. I ask God to allow me to use them in order to pick some people up. Are there any prophetic gifted people in here today that you can say, I'm a prophetic dancer, I'm a prophetic singer, I'm a prophetic writer, I'm a prophetic musician, I'm a prophetic servant, I'm a prophetic mentor? Because when I show up, I begin to shift the atmosphere and I begin to shift the environment because my gift is too strong that it begins to attract naysayers the same way it attracts people who need to benefit from my gift. And I have to let you here to know, you may not think the world hates you, but yes, the world does hate you. The world hates you because it can't control you. The world hates you because it can't limit you. The world hates you because you speak well against it, because this is a world of sorrow. When you have children's dreams who are assassinated by poverty, this is a painful world. When you have people who go to bed not to music, but they go to bed to the ricochet of bullets, this is a painful world. When you have education systems that educate our children based on the zip code and standardized tests instead of power, this is a world that hates you. When they try to take your voting rights because they know if you vote the way you're supposed to vote, you'll get them out of office, they are telling you that they hate you. Yeah. When they use black and brown bodies as target practice on the streets, and they go home with their paychecks, and they go home with their bullets, and they go home with their badges, they tell you that they hate you. But you have to say, it doesn't matter if they hate me, because I've been authorized by real power, and that's God. That's what Jesus says. Jesus says, okay, I know you have something against me, but I have power that's bigger than your power, because I've been shaped and fashioned, breathed by the image of God. Yeah, in the absence of his fans, in the absence of his family, in the absence of his friends, Jesus reclaims his authority because he says, I can't sit down quiet anymore because I have to preach and teach, because that's what God called me to do. It says in the middle of the festival, Jesus went into the temple, the very place that's trying to kill him. Jesus went into enemy territory and started doing the very thing that everybody walked away from him for. I love this because there's something powerful about the fact that Jesus goes to Jerusalem in spite of the consequences. Jesus goes to Jerusalem, the text says, to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. And you have to know what the Feast of Tabernacles in order to know why Jesus got a breath of fresh air. You have to know what it means to be in Jerusalem on this day in order to realize why Jesus said, I don't care who's coming after me, because I have a God who's bigger than anybody who come after me. In the middle of the temple, Jesus started teaching, and they all were perplexed. Let me tell you a little something about the Feast of Tabernacles. It was a feast that happened in October in order to celebrate and commemorate the fact that God kept Israel while they were in the wilderness. It's a 7-day process. It's a 7-day celebration where the people go from wherever they are to Jerusalem in order to celebrate the fact that after God delivered us out of slavery, God kept us in the wilderness. And this is how he says that they celebrate with torches of light, where they dance around the torches to celebrate the fact that in the midst of darkness, God led them anyway. That might bless somebody right there who's living in some darkness right now, that God may not always give you light, but God will give you God's presence. And when you have God's presence, it doesn't matter how dark it is, because you know God is with you. Occupational darkness, God is right there. Relationship darkness, God is with you. Financial darkness, God is with you. Emotional darkness, God is with you. Church darkness, and God is with you. Is there anybody in here today that can say, every now and then I just need to celebrate God's presence? If God never does anything else for me, God has already done enough. He woke me up this morning. God gave me strength. God gave me authority. God gave me joy. God gave me peace. In the midst of my darkness, God leads me. But not only the light, but they also celebrate the manna. Somebody say manna. Manna was in the wilderness. There was no water and there was no food. And they didn't know how they were going to survive. They had God's presence, but they did not know how they were going to survive. And every morning, without fail, God would drop manna from heaven on them that they did not work for, and they did not earn, and they possibly did not deserve. Did I just help somebody in here today? Because not only does God give you his presence, but God will also give you God's provisions. In those moments when you think you don't have enough, manna just starts falling out of nowhere. And look, manna means, what is this? That's what the word actually means. They would look up in the sky and they would say, what is this? And every morning I wake up, I'm like, wow, God, I can't believe you just did this for me. Wow, God, I can't believe how much you love me. Wow, God, I can't believe how much you keep me. Wow, God, I can't believe that you're still God and you're God all by yourself. Is there anybody here that can say God will give me God's presence and God's provisions? Hallelujah today. Thank you for your provisions. Thank you for your presence. I should be unemployed, but your manna came. I should be by myself, but your manna came. Is there anybody here excited about the manna? That's how I survive every single day. I just have a flashback in order for me to have a foresight, because a flashback will tell me that God is good, and I have the foresight to keep on moving. Yeah, but not only that, they celebrated the light, they celebrated the manna, but they also celebrated the tents. The tents, because they didn't build houses in the wilderness. They built tents in the wilderness. And they built tents in the wilderness because it was only temporary. And some of us have set up home in dry places when you were only supposed to put up a tent. And is there anybody in here today that can say, I'm glad God told me to build a tent and not build a house? Because the tent tells me it may be tough, but it's only temporary. And Jesus is sitting in the middle of the temple, and he said, God gave us light, God gave us manna, and God gave us tents, which means this too shall pass. I wish somebody in here today that will say, this too shall pass, because it may be tough, but it's not bigger than my God. Jesus started singing new songs. He started singing the songs of the faith that reminded him, greater is he who comes in the name of the Lord. They started reminding himself that the stone that the builder rejected has become the chief cornerstone. And Jesus says, you know why I'm not afraid? Because I know who I am. And I don't come to church simply to worship with you all. I come to church so God can remind me that I am God's child. I come to church so God that can remind me that I'm bigger than whatever I just went through. All right? You have to revolt against the pressures of rejection. You have to reclaim the priorities despite the risk. But finally, you need to reimagine your power beyond the rigidity. They say to Jesus, you, sir, have a demon. Jesus, The one who we have come to call the first Son of God is the one they call a demon. And the reason why they call him a demon is because they don't really know God. They know religion, but they don't know God. They know rigidity and doctrine, but they don't know the divine. And Jesus, I love this, does not even answer them, but Jesus just keeps on preaching and he just keeps on talking. This is powerful because they tell Jesus he has a demon. And I am often reminded of Friedrich Nietzsche's quote that says, "Be careful lest in casting out your demons, you cast out the best thing in you." Be careful about what you allow other people to demonize in your life, because people will always demonize difference when they can't control your difference. And so the reason why they label you and they press you and they misuse you is because you don't make sense to them. And I wish there was somebody in here today that can say, I wasn't born to make sense. I was born to give life. I wasn't born to be put in a box, but I was born to be who God wanted me to be. Because although I'm different, that does not mean I'm deficient. That although I'm different does not mean that there's anything wrong with me. And is there anybody in here today that can say, I'm glad I'm taking off the labels? All the labels that people have put on me for decades, for generations, for centuries, I'm taking those labels off because there is no way you can define me. And if you can't define me, then you can't hold me. Then you can't keep me. Then you can't paralyze me. Jesus keeps on preaching because Jesus wants you to know that you may not understand me, but guess what? You didn't send me either. And so since you didn't send me, that means you can't fire me. Since you didn't send me, that means you can't get rid of me. And is there anybody here today that can say, I know who sent me, and I don't come in my own authority, but I come in unique power. I come in powerful power. I come in God's power that lets everybody know that you may not be able to hold me, but that's not going to get rid of me. Do not adjust yourself to the pessimism, the mediocrity, the narrow vision, and the injustices of the world. You have to be like, yep, I'm different, and I know I'm different, and I'm okay with being different. I'm glad that I don't have to succumb to denied dreams, to interrupted imagination, to victimized vision, to pressed by pain. I don't have to have my aspirations assaulted because I am a child of God, which means if you don't know me, then you need to keep your mouth off me because you don't know what I have the power to do. I'm done, but you have to know that no matter who you are, the disappointment will arise, but you have some other power that's working on your behalf. That although you can't see God working, doesn't mean God is not working, because God loves to work behind the curtain. God loves to do the stage work. God loves to set things in order even before you get there. Let me close with, so you all remember the name Harriet Tubman, right? Harriet Tubman, probably one of the coldest, most brilliant, most brave sisters we've ever had on this soil. And Harriet Tubman, you know, she was known for those 19 trips she made from the north into the south and back to the north in order to move slaves on the Underground Railroad. You know that, right? And you also know that she said she could have freed thousands of more slaves if they only knew they were slaves. But when she was 12 years old, she was caught up in an altercation that she really had nothing to do with. When she was 12 years old, there was a runaway slave who was trying to run out of a store to get away from his slave master, and the slave master tells Harriet to get in the doorway and block the slave, and guess what? Harriet doesn't do it. And so what happens, the slave master throws a 2-pound weight at the slave and hits Harriet, and because of that, she lives with brain damage, permanent brain damage, and the brain damage that she experienced would cause her to fall asleep no matter where she was, in spite of the context, so much so that after she fell asleep, you couldn't wake her up because she was in a deep coma-like situation because of a brain injury in the past. You hear what I'm saying here? That Harriet Tubman, this woman who risked her life at least 19 times to go into the South, would sometimes fall asleep while she was on the journey, and she was never afraid of getting caught because she understood that she was on assignment. Harriet Tubman would fall asleep. She would put her life in danger while she was trying to free other people, but she did not stop because she knew God had something great for her to do. And one day she fell asleep beneath a sign that said wanted, $40,000 for Harriet Tubman. She's asleep under the sign, but nothing happens to her. And they say, Harriet, why were you so courageous? She said, I'm courageous because when I'm awake, I work for God. And when I'm asleep, God works for me. Goodbye, child of God. But that needs to be your testimony, that your God is always working for you, because no weapon formed against you shall prosper, because your God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all you can ask or think. Is there anybody here that can say, I've tried God and I found out that my God is all right with me? Is he all right? Is he all right? Won't God make a way for you? Won't God open doors for you? Won't God provide for you? Say yes. Say yes. When I think of the goodness of Jesus and all he's done for me, my soul cries out, hallelujah. Hallelujah. When you trust your gift, people may walk away from you. People may leave you. But your God is always working for you. Doors of the church are open.